Welcome to the Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast, a compelling discussion of local, regional, and national sports stories with intriguing guests. Now, here is your host, the self-proclaimed Wiregrass sports guy, Phillip Jordan.
What's up, y'all? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Podcast. I am Phillip Jordan from Last Word on College Football, 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I am the in-studio host and producer for Dothan Wolves Football. You can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. You can always email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. And the podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, all your favorite podcast platforms. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate, and review. And leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. The show is also on YouTube, so please go subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the videos. And if you leave a comment, just like with Apple Podcast reviews, if you leave a comment on YouTube, we'll read it on a future edition of the show. Got a fantastic show planned for you guys today. I'm going to be joined by Bill Bender, national college football writer from the Sporting News. We'll get his thoughts on what could happen, what the season could look like with college football. Don't stay on that too long. Then I get Bill's thought on the SEC overall, East and West. We'll talk some Big Ten football and get his thoughts on who are the contenders for college football overall, which Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, those three are kind of like overwhelming, I think, favorites for everybody. Those three are kind of separated from everybody else in people's minds while we are in preseason. But who's those four teams? Who could be some other teams that could jump in there? We'll get into all of that. So, without any further delay, here's my conversation with Bill Bender. Everybody joining me on the show today is Bill Bender, Sporting News national college football writer. Bill, I told you this off air. I appreciate you coming on the show, and it's been a while since we've talked. A lot has changed in the world, but I do appreciate you taking the time out today to come on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate you.
Yeah, so like I said, it was the national championship when you were last on, and all the stuff that has changed. It's just, and it's like you can't have a conversation now about any form of football without wondering if we will or not have a season. But where are you at right now, just overall, with how things are going toward if we will have a season?
Well, I mean, it's been fluid, and we've kind of had this conversation for the last 4 months. And I just posted something for us at SN about it. It's just there's got to be a perfect set of circumstances to happen from here on out for us to have it in the fall. And I think it starts, number one, with COVID itself. I mean, the numbers have to flatten out. And then, whether you do a conference-only model or a +1 model or a 9 or 10-game season, all of that hinges on the next couple of weeks, really, and then the next month or so, if we can actually lower the numbers and get those down to the point where we can have some football. And I think if that happens, we'll have a chance.
Oh, of course, this week with baseball starting their season off, and of course they're not going to have any fans, but they are playing in their stadiums. And NASCAR has been, some places have had fans. Do you think college football, the commissioners, the presidents, and all that, do you think they're keeping an eye on that, paying attention to what's going on over there, and maybe thinking they can implement some of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think the MLB model in particular, a 60-game season that's hyper-regionalized with division scheduling limited to 2 divisions, has been something that they can look at and say, hey, if that works, maybe we should just keep it in our regions. That's certainly one model. Some of the other things they have at work, I think they can take notes from. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different when you're dealing with college athletes and institutions that are of higher learning. There's a greater risk of lawsuits and those kind of things when it's not a professional business. But, we all kind of wink and nod at that. But, yeah, I think they're absolutely going to watch the NFL in particular, too. If the NFL starts opening training camps, and sure, the college football will try to integrate some of those things into their games.
Yeah, of course, with the Big Ten and Pac-12, they announced a couple weeks ago they were going conference only. And you look at the ACC, SEC, and the Big 12, they're kind of all, seems like they're saying, end of this month. Do you think those three will probably end up going the same route?
I don't know. I think the SEC and ACC are seriously considering the +1 model because it works for them. It protects a rivalry like a Florida State, Georgia Tech, South Carolina, Clemson. You can still squeeze those in, and obviously those are in the same region as well. So think they're considering those things, and they'll be very interesting to see if they can get them in. So, again, I don't have a problem with the conference-only model for the Big Ten or the Pac-12.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense in those regions. And for the SEC and the ACC, because they are the same region in a lot of ways, if they can get that to fly, go for it. But, to me, 8 to 10 games seems reasonable. 9's kind of the middle spot, and 9 might make the most sense, Phillip.
Yeah, I was looking at, of course, you kind of look just at the fan side of things, which, you in a selfish way, but as a fan, you look at the games we missed. And I was going to ask you which one of the games that we are not going to have that you will really look forward to, but I'm going to throw mine out there, and it's probably one that nobody will say. It involves Oregon, but I was looking forward to North Dakota State and Oregon. But what was a game for you that you were looking forward to that we're not going to have?
That's one. Oregon, obviously, without Oregon, Ohio State's a huge one. Trey Lance and North Dakota State going to Oregon. The week before that was one we're going to miss. I think Wisconsin and Notre Dame at Lambeau. You have to wonder how the SEC schedule will flip around a little bit with Georgia and Alabama are supposed to play in September. You wonder how they're going to move that around. I don't think Nick Saban's going to want to open up with that one. And that's going to be smart for that matter, with both teams breaking in new quarterbacks. So, those are the things that are going to have to be worked out. And that's why I think moving it to October, get an October start date, go 9 weeks from there, might be the way to be.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think Nick Saban decided, especially not being prepared all season after preparing for USC, wants to turn around and play Georgia that first game because, of course, Kirby's always so close to him. So Nick Saban's like, I need to get ready for this one a little bit. Don't want to kick off with that one. That's a dangerous game.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's one of the biggest games of the season. So, yeah, and again, the SEC is going to have to figure out how they want to balance that 8-game schedule, and it's going to be some decisions will have to be made. I think they have a chance to get it in, though. I really do. But again, it's all dictated on COVID, and I know I sound like a broken record here, but when you're dealing with a disease that still hasn't slowed down, which is still producing, at times you're seeing record numbers of positive cases on certain days, it makes it kind of tough to think, hey, we're going to play. So, all of those things are at work. Yeah,
let's look at it if we do play. These, especially down here in the SEC where I'm at, and I guess I'll start with the West. I mean, I look at it. I mean, there's some good teams behind Alabama there. Auburn, but the offensive line issues. LSU, talent but inexperience. And A&M they've got good parts, but I'm not sure receiver. But when you look at Alabama, I mean, with what they've got coming back, Mac Jones, who proved what he could do at the end of last year, Najee Harris at running back, those receivers, and of course, offense coordinator Steve Sarkisian. I mean, the offense for Alabama looks like they could be pretty lethal this upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, there's a lot of really good offenses in the SEC this year. Quarterback's an interesting question to try to figure out who the best quarterback is. I mean, obviously Alabama brings back those receivers. Najee Harris might be their best Heisman candidate just because what he can do from a two-way standpoint. And then, of course, the quarterback decision with Mac Jones, a guy that definitely played well last year. Played really well when he was pressed into service. And then I think we're all trying to get a look at Bryce Young. But I think you and I both wondering, what's that mean that he missed spring? Does that impact his chances of starting? It probably does.
Yeah, I was thinking about that and kind of just talking with some people that are Alabama fans, and overall, like you would have to think that would have been a much bigger quarterback battle between those two and him and Mac Jones if he had had a spring. But now that she didn't have that, I mean, Mac Jones obviously got to have that leg up because he's been there, he's been in the offense. And with them, too, of course, you look at Alabama's stats last year, you just look at that from defense side of the ball, except their defense was good. It was Alabama defense. But when they played the really good teams, that defense did struggle. Dylan Moses coming back, that's going to be a big deal for them, too, as well, I would think.
No, when you have that linebacker in the middle, he's a guy that, the linebacker in that defense is always the middle kind of a quarterback. Dylan Moses, obviously experienced, was playing at an All-American level, and then tears his knee last year, and they had to scramble for a replacement. So certainly somebody that they will welcome back. And like you said, when they got in those big games, I mean, 40-plus against Auburn, 40-plus against LSU. Michigan had some success against them in the first half before Alabama dropped back into two deep and tried to make Shea Patterson beat them deep. But it wasn't a national championship defense by Alabama standards. I think we can agree on that. And Moses will certainly help with that. Guys like Patrick Surtain, who comes back, is going to be pretty good as well. And they're going to have plenty of talent on that side of the ball.
When you look at the SEC West, who do you see as the second team there that maybe, if Alabama was to slip up, a team that could challenge them?
I mean, it's the same. LSU and Auburn are right there. I mean, LSU was able to do it last year, and you wonder how they're going to absorb the talent loss that they had with 14 or so guys going to the NFL draft and some others free agency. Obviously, losing Joe Burrow. And then Auburn, with Bo Nix back, having the confidence of doing it once. If he can go on the road and beat them, that'd be very interesting. Auburn's got a lot of talent as well. I mean, those are the two that kind of stick out in the division, and then you get into some wild cards like Texas A&M on that side of the division.
Yeah, with Auburn, hey, even though Gus Malzahn's never won in Tuscaloosa, if we're playing in front of no fans, that's kind of might could erase that, and Gus gets his first win in Tuscaloosa if that's the situation. If we had SEC media days, I was really looking forward to seeing where the picks from the media was going to be with the East, with Florida and Georgia, because Georgia is super talented, but it just seems like Florida's got the right pieces coming back. And of course, with the not having spring, Georgia, new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, all that was going to stunt their development early in the year. When you look at those two between Florida and Georgia, who do you like?
I mean, this is the year if you're Florida that you think, hey, we might be able to do it. I mean, experienced quarterback coming back. Kyle Trask played well in that game, somewhat. I mean, they were hanging around in that game, even though they didn't win it last year. And then with Georgia, I mean, they're going to have options at quarterback. That's obviously the big question. You wonder how much the offense is going to flip with Todd Monken, new offensive coordinator. And, I mean, that's the game that really determines that side of the conference, and it has the last couple of years. It's an opportunity for both schools to really flex, and depending on where they put it on the schedule, if it's in its traditional spot, it's going to be huge, and you got to think it will be.
Yeah, it's interesting with Georgia, especially now when you got JT Daniels is now eligible. So you would go in anything, and Jamie Newman, who was a solid quarterback. I mean, I've seen him on some draft boards already. Hadn't played a game for Georgia yet, but JT Daniels also coming from USC. He was a highly touted recruit, 5-star coming out of California. So that's going to be interesting because with Kirby, it's kind of seemed like a trend at Georgia under him. It was Fromm and Eason, then Fromm and Fields. Now you got Daniels and Newman there.
Yeah, it is. It's going to have an interesting decision. It's going to come down to which one's more efficient in that new look offense. I don't know how much it'll be a new look, but I mean, with Monken and the offensive coordinator, you got to figure they've seen how it's won with teams like LSU and Georgia or Alabama the last couple of years with those high-flying offenses with a game-breaking quarterback, and that's what they're going to have to find. They're going to have a lot of talent at running back and receiver. Offensive line should be as good as it normally is. For those things to kick it out and take it to the next level, you need to have that elite signal caller that can flip the field. And I think Newman's got a better chance to start this year, but I mean, having Daniels there as another body certainly isn't going to hurt Georgia at all.
Oh, I did want to ask you, too, about a little bit on the Big Ten. Of course, Ohio State, they're overwhelming favorite there. I mean, they lost players. They lose every year. They're like Alabama, lose and replace, rebuild the team. And you got Justin Fields there at quarterback, who for some may be, is thought to be the top quarterback in the draft next year. On Penn State's there. I mean, Michigan's a lot of guys. You got Wisconsin. Overall, the Big Ten, for Ohio State, who's that next team that could maybe give them some issues?
Penn State on the field right now. I mean, just because, it probably won't be a whiteout, but I mean, they're at home. They've closed the talent, not really closed the talent gap. They're just the second most talented team in the Big Ten right now. They've got difference makers like Journey Brown, Micah Parsons, experienced quarterback Sean Clifford. Problem is they got to go to Michigan. So, I mean, among Michigan, Penn State, and Wisconsin, it's on somebody to kind of step up.
Yeah.
Beat the guys. The stat have been thrown out there a lot this offseason, and those three schools are combined 1-22 against the Buckeyes since Urban Meyer took over. So it's not just Michigan. It's everybody in that conference that's had problems beating Ohio State, and that hasn't changed.
Overall, country-wise, of course, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson in no particular order, so nobody thinks I'm putting anybody over anybody here. Those three seem to be favorites. If we have a season and we had a normal playoff, those three would be the favorites. Who's the fourth team? Can I see a lot of stuff at Oregon, a second SEC team, maybe Oklahoma? Who do you see as kind of like the other teams that could jump in there, be the contenders?
I mean, those three are on the high plane, and Georgia and LSU have been to the championship games. I mean, it's those five and everybody else in a lot of ways. And then, if we're talking about a fourth playoff spot, maybe it's Oklahoma. Maybe they jump up and win the Big 12 again and get their latest playoff berth. Maybe it's somebody else like Oregon, that finally breaks through in the Pac-12 and doesn't have that slip up like they did late last year, where if they don't beat Arizona State or Auburn, they're in last year. And then we talked about Florida and Penn State a little bit. I think they're kind of that next group.
And finally, before I let you go, kind of more of a fun question, kind of to close out here our conversation here. And I've been asking this, or starting to ask this to some of the college football writers and people that come on the show. If you had to win one game this coming up college football season, again, if we have it, which is one quarterback you would want leading your team?
Just have to win one game. I mean, Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
He's only lost one. I mean, that's it. I mean, he's lost one. He's on his way to being the number one pick. He's a really talented player. Certainly has the opportunity to do that. And I think I would take him. When you have a guy that's 29-1 as a starter, or 25-1, I think, as a starter, they had their 29-game win streak broken. It's hard not to go against him. Justin Fields, Sam Howell, there's some other talented ones out there, but it's hard to go with anybody but Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I feel like maybe he is, for some people, unrightly been kind of not just for the one loss, in the national championship game. So hopefully we'll have a season and he can rectify that and go forth and show everybody why he's as good as he is, which we all know he's, people who follow college football know he is that. But, Bill, once again, I do appreciate you coming on the show. Like I said, appreciate the time. Hopefully, when we talk again, we will know we're having games. We'll have games for sure we know we can talk about and break down. But if the listeners wanted to follow you online, where can they find you?
I'm at TheBender92 at sportynews.com, and looking to hope to have that season like everybody else. Phillips, that you and I can talk on a more regular basis about the games on the field and not the ongoings off the field. So hopefully we can get that done.
Yeah, I hope so too. I hope so. I have been during this whole thing, been the optimist. I'll admit when the Big Ten and Pac-12 made their announcements a couple weeks ago, my optimism did drop a little bit, but I'm still trying to hold on to that hope and that optimism that we will get a football season and overall things in the world will turn around. But yeah, I hope we have that. And once again, Bill, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime down the road.
Oh, no problem. Thanks, Phil.
And once again, thanks to Bill Bender for coming on today's podcast. I always enjoy talking to Bill Bender. Like I told you there, I hadn't talked to Bill since the day or two after the national championship game when LSU beat Clemson. So it was good to hear from Bill. Good thoughts there. And his thoughts there on the SEC and the Big Ten as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. Now, a couple things. Still got a little bit of time left. Go over couple football news. Over in the NFL, they announced, or hadn't really announced, is heading this direction, that there will not be a preseason. And instead of 90 players on the training camp roster, there will be 80 and only 8 contact practices. So there's a lot of things to unpack here. To me, look, you understand it. Not as many players, so not many people in contact, and then the contact part of it. And then no preseason. You say the games don't matter. But I think this is a big issue development-wise because, these stars, they're not going to play in these preseason games anyways. But not having it for the other guys trying to make a roster. And this is a big thing for them going into these games, impressing the coaches. Yeah, most coaches already know what the roster is going to look like, but there's guys that do have opportunities to impress. And then when you go into the fact is you're only going to have 8 contact practices or padded practices, the product is not going to look good the first week of the season. I'm just telling you that right now. It doesn't usually look good the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season anyways. It's almost like weeks 1, 2, and 3, and sometimes 4 is an extension of the preseason. But now where you're going with this route where there's not going to be a lot of contact and real practicing, going on, real football action anyways, I guess you would say. In the lead up to the season, the product's not going to look that good. It's going to be delayed. I think you could go 5 or 6 weeks with this thing, and the product's just not going to look good. And like I said, there's a lot of guys out there that are not going to get opportunities. There's usually 90. They're only going to do 80, so that's 10 players that aren't going to get opportunities that normally would. It's a shame there's not a spring league, which there would be XFL, but the pandemic kind of took them out. I mean, I know they were probably hurting money the first year, but everything seemed like they were doing well. So with them not going to be able to come back, that's hurt. The NFL just needs some kind of development league, and I'm still standing by it. I think the NFL needs to start one. I know they don't want to do it because they're losing money. NFL Europe lost tons of money. They shut that thing down 13 years ago. But that's just my read. What they need to do, they're not going to do it, and it's unfortunate for a lot of these guys that, like I said, they're fringe players that are not going to get them opportunities to prove themselves on the field, and the quality of play is not going to be good. Look, it's different times, so I don't think the NBA quality of play is going to be great. We'll see what it looks like, but football wise, those first couple weeks, it's going to look ugly in the NFL, and it's not like you have the warm up games in the NFL like you do college. Which college isn't going to have that either. Probably going to be all conference schedules, more likely. SEC and ACC might try to pull some off playing against each other, but yeah, you're not going to be playing them FCS opponents to start off the season there as well. So it's going to be interesting with football all around how the level of play is going to look when we do get going, if we get going with football season. Another piece I wanted to talk about, of course, I am down in Alabama, and the SWAC announced they were not going to have a fall sports season. So that puts Auburn without an opponent week 1. So, see, they can still play North Carolina. Like Bill Bender talking about, if the SEC and ACC come to agreement on something, Auburn, North Carolina, you can still have that game. Probably wouldn't do it at a neutral site like they originally planned, and that would be interesting if they don't go to a neutral site. How do they agree on where the game is played? But we'll have to, I guess, cross that bridge when it comes. But Auburn has an opening. Now, Troy was scheduled to play a SWAC opponent to start the season too. And this is kind of something I've always felt. I posted this on my Facebook and on my Twitter account. Alabama and Auburn need to get over themselves and play Troy. Now, Alabama's trying to figure out maybe they could play BYU in that first game to replace the USC, of course, Pac-12, going to an all-conference schedule. And I was listening to the radio out of Birmingham, WJOX, a roundtable. They were discussing that there's been rumors that the Pac-12 may put their schedule out this week. We'll see. That'd be something cool to talk about. But anyway, so Alabama, maybe not as much here. But Auburn, you can play Troy, and why not? Help Troy out, because Troy's going to need that, because maybe they can't play at Tennessee. They lost, or they may lose the NC State game. Help Troy out. Play Troy. I mean, it's always this deal. Alabama and Auburn will not play Troy, UAB, and South Alabama in football. They play them in other sports, but they won't play them in football. And look, the reason is because more likely Auburn, Alabama, they should beat Troy. But Troy's no slouch, and they've got talented players, and if Auburn, Alabama came in there and not with their head straight, Troy could beat them. And that's the reason why they won't do it. Because there's always that chance, because there's nothing in their eyes for Alabama or Auburn to gain by playing Troy. Troy has everything to gain, but I just think this is a time where they need to help out South Alabama if you can. Play a game against UAB if you can as well. Just do that. You need to help those in-state schools, and I would love to see that. I think a lot of people in state Alabama would love to see Auburn or Alabama playing Troy or South Alabama or even UAB. So, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll just keep our fingers crossed. Maybe Auburn can help out the Troy Trojans and host them for the opening game, because since Auburn lost that game against Alcorn State. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this edition of the Phillip Jordan Podcast. We'll let you guys know, just kind of pulling behind the curtain a little bit. Of course, it was coming out, excited, the Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast. And this is the only time I'm going to talk about this, so I'm not going to make a big deal over it. But the show is going to be football podcast. I tried doing different things, and you told me, you gave me your answer. You did not like me talking about other sports. The baseball stuff was not. It was record lows for me. Podcast listens on that one. I enjoyed the conversation with Danny Vietti. Maybe down the road I can kind of figure out a different show to do, all sports, I don't know. And with football season coming up, and I do believe we are going to get some form of football season, that's going to be what the show's all about anyways. So it might be revisiting the all sports aspect when we go into 2021. We'll see. But the show's not going back to talking SEC. It's kind of going with the same name, and the logo is going to slightly change. Just slightly, just with the wording. The Phillip Jordan Football Podcast. Predominantly college football, but on occasion I will have an NFL guest on the show. So let you guys ahead know that. But most of the time it's going to be college football related. Tomorrow on the podcast, speaking of which, I will be joined by Bleacher Report NFL analyst Brent Zableski. He is also an NFL draft analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. It covers mainly the Cleveland Browns. But Brent, he's got his fingerprints all over the NFL coverage and college football when it comes to NFL draft. So we're going to get into some rookie quarterbacks coming up this year in the NFL, but we'll also talk some quarterbacks for next year's NFL draft class. Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields will be discussed as well. So that you'll get a little bit of everything, NFL, some college football talk on tomorrow's podcast. I've already recorded that one. Actually, it's a good 30-minute conversation between me and Brent. Brent is a regular here, so he will have a monthly appearance here on the podcast. So I'm really excited about that. Me and Brett get things going again, having him on the show once a month to talk, like I said, NFL and look at the college side of things when it comes to NFL draft. So I think you're going to enjoy my conversation with Brett Zableski tomorrow to send you out on a high note on a Friday. Remember, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all your social media at PJordanSEC. This podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all your favorite podcast platforms. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. I don't know who you are, but somebody out there gave me a 4-star rating, so you were nothing but a hater because you could have gave me 5 stars. I would have rather you gave me a 3, but you gave me the 4 like a straight-up hater. And I kid, of course, if you were listening to the show, whoever that was that gave me that 4-star rating. I can't talk here at the end of the podcast. Appreciate you listening to the show. And also the podcast, you can check it out on YouTube. Some interviews I do video form, some I don't. It's just because sometimes it works for the guest, sometimes it don't. But anyways, all the podcasts are on there in some kind of video form. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like the videos, leave a comment. Just like the Apple podcast reviews, if you leave a comment on YouTube, I will read it on a future edition of the show. Anyways, guys, I'll talk to you tomorrow when I'm joined by Brent Zableski. Hope everybody has a great Thursday. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to today's Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to tune in to the next episode for more great sports talk.